Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday Talks with Craig. Sorry I'm a little late today. I was in a meeting that just ended, and so this was the soonest I could get started. So if you're trying to join me at 12 o'clock, sorry I wasn't there, but better late than never, right? So thanks for joining me. If you're here with me now or maybe watching later, thanks for tuning in. And the last couple weeks for these Tuesday Talks, a couple weeks ago I was just sort of thinking about this reality that this pandemic that we find ourselves in just continues to go on, and you maybe are feeling a little tired by it and just kind of wondering when things are going to go back to a sense of normal. And sort of this word just came to mind, it kept coming to mind, and the word was persevere or perseverance. So I've been talking about perseverance the last couple weeks, and we've been in the book of James and talking about how James encourages us to persevere, to embrace trials. You know, last week we looked at Job's example from James 5. He mentions Job, and so we talked a little bit about Job's journey and how he didn't give up on his faith, he didn't give up on God, and just the blessing that came as he persevered. And so I just, again, want to speak to this word, perseverance, and encourage you to persevere. And we're going to look at Hebrews 12 in a moment, but let me just ask this question. Have you ever felt like giving up? Maybe in this season of COVID, you've felt like giving up on certain things, or just this feeling of wanting to give up. Has there been other times in your life where maybe you've wondered or felt this feeling of I just want to give up, I want to throw in the towel? And that would be the opposite of persevering. But in Hebrews, the example of a race, he mentions this idea of running with perseverance, like running a race. And so I was thinking about that. I'm not much of a runner, but I was thinking about this idea of a race, and more of like a long distance race, and sort of the highs and lows that a runner goes through. And I'll sort of speak as a very, very amateur runner. I don't enjoy running. The only running I like to do is if I'm playing a sport like soccer, where running is required, but there's a bit more of a goal to it. But running a race isn't really my thing. But one thing comes to mind as I think about running and running with perseverance. A number of years ago, when our kids were younger, in elementary school, every year there would be the annual Terry Fox run. And the whole school body would gather together, and often I would volunteer as a parent to just go and help manage this Terry Fox run and just make sure that kids don't go missing and they stay on the course, and that we encourage everyone to finish. And so this Terry Fox run would begin, and there'd be 600 or 700 students, and the real keeners at the front of the pack would go off and literally run. And then you had the little ones, like in kindergarten, the 5 and 6 year olds who were sort of trailing at the back of the pack, and you had to kind of encourage them to keep going. But if you think about the Terry Fox run, it always began at the school, and then they did this circuit through our neighborhood that we live in. And it would end up back at the school, sort of the finish line. And there would be moments throughout the walk or the run where we would hear students, complaining and want to give up, and their friends would maybe encourage them, or us parent volunteers would encourage them. You can do it, keep going, don't give up. I never used the word persevere, but really that's what it was about. Keep going, persevere. Stay strong, stand firm, right? Don't give up, don't throw in the towel. And then at the end of the run, as the keeners, those who ran ahead of the pack, they would wait at the finish line, and they would just cheer everybody on as they were crossing the line. And you'd get the grade 6 students who are the fastest, they're all there, and they're cheering as the grade 5s come, and then the grade 4s and the grade 3s, and all the way down to the little kindergartners. And everybody's cheering and celebrating because they'd crossed the finish line, and nobody gave up. We always got everybody through the entire race, but it required some perseverance. And some of these kids were just dog tired and really dragging their feet by the end, but they didn't give up. So I turn to Hebrews chapter 12, and this is right after, in chapter 11 in Hebrews is sort of this like hall of fame of, call it the hall of faith, and all these faith heroes and how they're commended for their great faith. And in chapter 12, the writer says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The writer of Hebrews is encouraging the believers to persevere. And he says, think of it like a race. Let us run the race of faith, the journey of faith. Let us run with perseverance. Let us, throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And so I just wanted to kind of think a little bit about this idea of what does it look like? What do we need in order to run with perseverance? If our journey of faith is like a race, a marathon is probably what it's most appropriate to call it. If our journey of faith is like a marathon race, what do we need in order to persevere? And so a couple things that come out of this passage. First is to throw off everything that entangles us, throw off everything that hinders, and he talks about sin. In our journey of faith, sin is going to entangle us, and we need to cast it aside. We need to throw it off. We need to get rid of the stumbling blocks, the things that are in the way. And then he says, fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. And he talks about Jesus. The pioneer is like the starter. He's the start of our faith, and the perfecter is like the finisher. Jesus is the beginning and the end of our faith. Our faith is all about him. And so if we're thinking about the journey of faith like a race, we're to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. He's the start, he's the middle, he's the end of the race. We're to look to him. And in looking to him, the writer of Hebrews talks about how Jesus, he says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. As we look to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, we look to his example of endurance and how he endured such opposition, such suffering. He went through the darkest of dark seasons that probably any of us would ever go through. He endured the cross. And he said that he endured the cross because he knew that on the other side, he would sit down at the right hand of the throne of God. He knew that the race was not over at the cross. That was just in the middle part of it. And for those of us who maybe feel like we're struggling in the middle of the race and we feel like throwing in the towel, maybe we're tired, maybe we're losing heart, maybe we're like the kindergarten kid halfway through the Terry Fox run who just thinks, I can't do it anymore. The writer of Hebrews is telling us, look to Jesus. He endured opposition. He endured the worst of opposition. He endured the deepest of suffering, and yet he endured because he knew that was not the end. The end was something greater. And so the writer of Hebrews ends that little passage. He says, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. We're to look to Jesus, who endured suffering, but then was taken to glory at the end. Think of all those kids at the end of the Terry Fox race, cheering each other on, celebrating as they cross the finish line. And we can look to Jesus, who's not just the start of the race, but he's the finish. He's the perfecter of our faith. And he too is at the end of the line, cheering us on with this great cloud of witnesses. If you want to read chapter 11, all these famously faithful people, faithful to the Lord, they're all at the finish line, cheering us on, encouraging us to keep going, to not lose heart, to endure, and to persevere. So I want to encourage you today, whatever it is you're going through, and if it's COVID related or unrelated to COVID, whatever you're going through that's difficult and you're feeling like I'm in the middle of the race and I just want to throw in the towel, please don't give up. Even if your pace is just a slow, steady, one foot in front of the other, barely even walking, please don't give up. Persevere. Stand firm in your faith. Look to Jesus, both the pioneer, the start, and the perfecter, the end, and he's there with you in the middle of the race. Look to him for strength and encouragement and keep following his lead. He has great things in store for you as you continue to follow him. And at the end of it all, at the finish line, we want to look to him and hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." My desire is to follow Jesus faithfully, and I know that from one day to another, it could be, one day might be easier than the next. One day might be more difficult than the next. We're going to go through ups and downs of life, and the race is a race of ups and downs. But like a famous pastor and writer, Eugene Peterson, said, it's like a long obedience in the same direction. It's about persevering, not giving up, standing firm, standing strong, enduring, and looking to Jesus. So may you look to Jesus today, no matter what you're going through. May he be your strength and your guide. May he be the one that you fix your eyes on this race that we're all running. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you again next week.